Hello everyone, very good evening to all of you. My name is Harshvardhan Singh and today we are going to discuss about the another aspect of our approach class, that is approach to world history. Today we are going to discuss about the question and along with that we are going to discuss about the concept and then we are going to discuss about how to deal with this question. This question was asked in UPSC exam 2020. Okay, so if you read this question carefully, you will get to know that this question belongs to a topic colonization, decolonization and neocolonization. So what was the question? Critically examine whether it was true that after a century of dependency on Europeans, Africans were ill prepared for the task of nation building. Again, reread the question. Very simple. Critically examine whether it was true that after a century of dependency on European, Africans were ill prepared for the task of nation building. If you just read this question, do you agree with this view? Because the question, what they ask, whether it was true, whether it is true or false. So most of you are like that, yes it is true, and if your answer is like that, yes it is true, there is no need to write anything after that because you said that's it. So it is not the case that you are going to deal with this question like this. So how we are going to deal with this question? First we are going to discuss about the topic from where this question was asked. Okay, the main topic from where the question is colonization, decolonization and new colonization. These are the phases, and first we are going to understand this concept of what is colonization, what is decolonization and how neocolonialism played an important role in contemporary world. Colonization, what is the main important aspect of colonization? What is the main purpose of colonization? Very simple, the main purpose of colonization is basically exploitation of resources. A very simple thing, exploitation of resources, that is the main purpose of colonization. But how this process of colonization started? What factors that gave boost to this process of colonization? There were so many factors. The most important, or we can say the guiding factor for this colonization process was imperialism. Imperialism, as you know, emperor policies, expansion, that is imperialism. So earlier this concept was present, but this concept was related to the expansion of empire in the neighborhood areas. But now, due to the factors like industrial revolution, this idea of imperialism get a, what we can say, a vast outlook. That is, another important factor played a role in the imperialism, and that factor is also known as industrial revolution. So industrial revolution and imperialism get merged with each other, and that gave birth to the policy known as colonialism. So many other factors are also responsible. For example, a very simple thing, that is trade routes are developed, new areas, new continents also discovered. Along with that, surplus population was there in European continent and they want to migrate them. So they deported these population from European countries to Latin America, to Africa, or in the Austria, New Zealand, etc. So this two factors played an important role. First is imperialism was there, second industrial revolution, and rest other factors, the modern techniques and all. Even this was a period where the scientific development was there, and most important aspect of that scientific development was related to applied science. Clear? So these factors were there. So what is the purpose of colonialism? As we have mentioned here, exploitation of resources. What is basic difference between trade and exploitation of resources? In trade, basically what is the case, that is, if this country is England and this country is India, there is an exchange of goods and services with respect to money. That is trade. Means, for example, from India to England, we are sending the goods, they are going to provide us money. It is this vice and versa, that if Indian wants to purchase anything from Britain, then they have to pay money for that. That is the exchange of goods and services. Maybe it is having trade surplus or trade deficit. You know all these concepts and all. What is the difference between this trade and economic exploitation? A very simple thing. What is this economic exploitation? This concept is very clear. That means here Indians are sending their goods to Britain and Britain was giving nothing in return, or whatever they are going to pay, it is much less than what is required. So basically it is a drain of wealth. It is a drain of wealth, also known as one-way transfer of money, wealth from one place to another place. Why colonies? Why colonies? Because in the colonies you have two things. For example, let's consider the case of India and England. Everybody knew about India and England, so we are going to discuss about them. So India is very well known for production of cotton, and today also we are one of the largest producer of cotton. Clear? So from here, the cotton as a raw material, Britishers are going to purchase this cotton at the cheapest rate. Why it is so? Because they force us to grow cotton. It was a cash crop, so peasant force. And you know, at that time Britishers destroy old traditional industries in India, so we were mostly dependent on the European powers to purchase it, and basically British were there. So at the cheap price, means at the lower price, they are going to purchase the cotton and they are going to send to Manchester. Everybody knew about this. Then after Manchester, what they do? They sell the finished good to India. Finished goods like Manchester clothes were very famous at that time, and it was costly. Means if we considered in a common term like in rupees, suppose if the cotton was having worth of 100 rupees, they were purchasing the cotton at 40 rupees. It is real value of cotton, 40 rupees was their purchasing thing. So 60 rupees they earn the profit, and profit is with England. Next thing, whatever the product they are going to sell, it is around 200 rupees. And they are going to sell to India. And why India is going to purchase? Because in India there is no handicraft industry anymore. All the traditional industry destroyed. So they were dependent on the finished goods, and finished goods, who is going to sell? Britain is going to sell, yes, to India. That means from raw material side, they are taking the raw material at the cheapest rate and they are selling their finished good at the costlier. And why India is going to purchase? Because colony, slave, they don't have any option. And that is the ideology of colonialism. Means India became their own market. No competition at all, no competitor at all. If they are going to increase the prices, still India is going to pay. That was the case, and that is the way colonialism acted as a tool of exploitation. And it is not just the case with the India. Colonies, the European nation established their colony everywhere. There are very few colonies where the Britishers or this European power established themselves. Means they implant the European culture there. Like very few example. In America they implant the culture. Yes. In South Africa they implant the culture, as well as in Austria they implant the European culture. But at the rest of the places they didn't implant it because the climatic condition is not suitable for them. That is the basic reason. So this Asia and Africa and Latin American colony were basically acted as a land of resources, most important supply source of raw material for the industrialization in European countries. Clear? So it is the process, the colonization was there. And do you really think so that any independent country is going to allow this madness? Of course not. No independent country is going to allow. So what they did, they established their administrative control over that particular country, because establishment of administrative structure leads to control over the resources. Clear? Maybe the agricultural resources, maybe the economic resources, or whatever the policy they are going to design, these policies are favorable to these European powers. So one way colonialism acted as a tool of exploitation, and they established their rule there. In meanwhile, these colonial powers also provided some education, basic education, because they cannot afford the people to migrate from their country to these areas. Climatic condition was harsh. So what they want? They want scribes. They want scribes to take care of their day-to-day administrative work. Clear? So it was the case everywhere. Clear? So there are very few students or few people who wants to pursue higher education, so they went to European countries. The colonial masters were belong to which country, they are going there. And what is the case? These colonial countries were basically under what we can say, a tremendous change was going on during the 18th and 19th century. Enlightenment was there, French Revolution was there, American Revolution was there, new ideas. So these new ideas make these students enlightened, and they realize the main or true character of this colonial power, because this colonial power present themselves as they are on civilizing mission. They don't have any intention to rule these African or Asian nation, but God asked them to do so. But once these enlightened, educated people realized that true character of colonial power, they started agitating against them, and that leads to beginning of national movement in all these African and Asian countries. So this is all about colonialism, a basic aspect, basic concept of colonialism. So how the process of decolonization started? So decolonization is also having the two aspects. The first, of course, is related with the Latin America. Latin American countries got independence much before the other countries, and next phase of decolonization is Asia and Africa. This phase is basically after World War II, and this phase is led by Simon Bolivar. Clear? And whatever I say to you, this story is applicable here as well. Means external and internal factors both were responsible for decolonization process. External process means basically here we are going to talk about the American Revolution was there. It inspired the masses. Along with that, Napoleon was too much powerful, and Latin America was mostly under control of Spain and Portugal. So Napoleonic power made these two countries weaken, and that's why liberation was possible here. So it was the external factor. Internal factor, of course, Simon Bolivar and the people like Simon Bolivar, enlightenment, they resisted and they got freedom. So that is the decolonization in first phase. Second phase, internal factors, of course, colonial revolution was there. This national movement everywhere was there. Enlightened, educated people, Western educated people, they started the movement, they provided the leadership. That is the one factor. Mass agitation was there. The other external factors like World War II make this European power weaker. Along with that, the two most important players emerge in the world scene, and that is USA and USSR, and these two powers were against the colonialism, against the authority of one nation to over the other. Means slavery, they are against this. So that is the case, that these two factors and so many other factors were also there. So that leads to decolonization. But now what? Now the next chapter again started here, and this is very important. So many countries got independence, as we have mentioned in Latin American country, we have mentioned the Asian and African country. They got the independence from the European powers in gradual phase. But the most important thing was they became the victim of neocolonialism. Hence, what exactly the difference between neocolonialism and colonialism? In colonialism, direct establishment of control leads to exploitation of resources. And in neocolonialism, it was not the case. In neocolonialism, without controlling or without establishment of direct control, the purpose is going to solve. And what was the purpose? Purpose was very simple. Yes, everyone, purpose, economic exploitation of resources. Clear? How it is possible without controlling or without establishing a direct control, how can you exploit the resources? It's very simple. If you control the policy makers, then it is very simple. Yes, and it happened most of the cases in African nation, most of the cases in Asian nation, and Latin American countries also fall into this trap of neocolonialism. Means what these countries, maybe the European country, maybe the America, what they did, they influenced the few handful Western educated people, they forced them to pursue the policy which were in the favor of these European nation or American nation, and finally the main purpose solved, that is the economic exploitation. Clear? So neocolonialism is this term, and these are the phases: colonialism, decolonization and neocolonization. Clear? So this concept is clear to you, everyone. I hope there is no problem at all to understand this process. Now we are going to deal with the question. This is the question which was asked in the examination. Once again, I am going to read for it. Critically examine whether it was true that after the century of dependency on Europeans, Africans were ill prepared for the task of nation building. Yes, everyone. First of all, if you know the basic, or if you know the, what we can say, if you have a basic idea of Africa, then most of you quite aware of this fact that most of the African nations are poor. Agree? Most of the African nations are poor. Why these countries remain poor? If you know the geography, if you read the NCERTs and all, you will get to know that Africa is full of natural resources. Full of natural resources. And if the country is having so much of natural resources, if the continent is having full of natural resources, then how it is possible that continent remain backward? So there should be some factors. Clear? Yes, there should be some factors that are responsible, and because of these factors, African nations are still poor. In most of the African nation, you have heard about this ethnic conflict. A very famous for a long time, the conflict between Sudan. Means now the two countries are there, Sudan and South Sudan. Yes, even the Rwanda, the very famous Rwandan genocide was there. In so many places you have seen such type of genocide was there. One ethnic tribe is going to kill the other ethnic tribe. So conflict are there. In African nations, civil war is a very common factor everywhere. Why it is so? So for that reason, first you have to understand the factors, which factors are responsible for it. So when we are going to talk about the factors, it is not the case that only internal factors, means related to that particular continent or related to that particular country, is responsible. There are few other factors are also responsible, and that are known as external factors. So first we are going to discuss about the external factors that played an important role in this process. Clear? So what is the condition, what is the question? Dependency on European, Africans were ill prepared for the nation building case. So why they were ill prepared for nation building? What factors? So first we are going to discuss about the external factors. External factors means what exactly? External factors. Basically, external factors is related to the foreign policy adopted by the powerful nations of that time, maybe the European Western powers or maybe the new powers like USSR, USA and all. So first of all, first important factor, that is, as you know, and we already mentioned, Africa is full of natural resources and everybody wants to establish their control. They were having vested interest. So the most important factor, vested interest of European powers and countries like USSR, China, etc. Clear? How it is so? Vested interest, because if they are having a favorable government in Africa, then it is very easy for them to exploit it. It is the one of the part of neo-colonialism. Without establishing direct control, make the policies of that particular country which are going to give benefits to these powers. And the most important role here played by Cold War politics. As everybody knew about the Cold War politics, in the Cold War, just after Second World War, Cold War began. It was initially the competition or the what we can say the race to establish the supremacy of one ideology over other, that is the capitalism over communism. So it was very common. Yes, it was very common at that time, and you know Africa is full of natural resources. That's why who wants to establish control? Either the capitalists want to establish control or communists want to establish control. And how the communists are going to establish control? By spreading the communalism there. Yes, by spreading the communist ideas there. That is the reason they want to establish control over it, so that they can take the advantage of resources in Africa. And if African nations are powerful, or if the African nation are in position to take their own decision, do you really think so that these African nations are going to entertain or allow these Western European powers or communist power to interfere into their day-to-day affairs? Of course not. So what they want? They want weak, or the government which is going to rule these African nations should be just in namesake. They should be act as a puppet in the hands of Western power or communist power. And that's why these powers take care of one factor, that these nations should not have become the strong. They should not be independent in all sense. They should totally dependent on decision making on these nations. That is the first and most important external factor is responsible for that. Clear? Second most important factor, the external factor is there. Okay, second important external factor we are going to discuss. As we have mentioned, the Cold War politics. Second most important, and it is related to the colonial past. The colonial past. And in the colonial past, whatever these countries got independence, but they have some affinity with their previous colonial masters. So if any problem emerge, then they are going to discuss or they are going to take help from their colonial masters. Colonial past is also responsible for it, and these the old colonial power, they also want to take the advantage of this situation so that they can grab the maximum benefits from these countries. So they don't want these country to be a strong nation state. Clear? So Cold War politics is also important, but at the same time the old power, colonial past, and mostly the European powers, they also try to establish their influence over the country, and that's why they don't want these countries to be independent in true sense. That's why they are not going to allow the build the nation in a true sense. So this is the external factor. Third important factor and external factor, that is most of the countries fall into trap of new colonialism. This is the third factor, fall into the trap of new colonialism. How it is so? It's very detailed topic, but in one sense I am going to tell you that for some vested interest of these African nations or the short-sightedness of the African leadership of that time, they become part of either one bloc or another bloc, and after that they suffered a lot. Because the madness of Cold War was going on, the ideological conflict became the conflict of two nations to establish their supremacy in the world, and these countries suffered a lot. So these are the three most important factors responsible for ill prepared of the task of nation building. These are the external factors. Cold War is an important thing. Second, dependency on colonial masters or colonial past, and third most important, fall into the trap of new colonialism. So these are the three external factors played an important role. Okay. Now internal factor. First we are going to discuss the concept, so don't worry about that. The last important thing we are going to discuss how to deal with this question. Internal factor. Yes everyone, what do you think? Internal factor. The first most important internal factors, that is diverse ethnicity. Some of you might get confused and some of you are going to argue with me that sir, India is also a diverse country. We have a linguistic diversity, we have the ethnic diversity, yes, we have religious diversity. So many diversities are there in India, and still India is a nation state. And you are going to argue with me, but there is a huge difference between India and these states. I am going to explain in this question only. So first most important thing, that is diverse ethnicity, means as these colonial masters, when they established their control over this African nation, their intention was not to enlighten them. Their intention was very clear. So what they want? They want exploitation of the resources. Clear? So what they did, they didn't introduce the proper education there. They didn't want these countries to be strong. So what was the ethnic diversity was there, or the division was there, they didn't interfere into that. So because of this diverse ethnicity, there was a distinct internal disharmony among them. Clear? So diverse ethnicity, and because of that there is a distinct internal disharmony among them. That means one tribe and so many tribes are there, because it is a tribal area only. So many tribe, and every tribe wants to establish their control over the government, over the administration, and that's why conflict was going on, and this conflict gave birth to situation of civil war. Agree? Yes everyone, do you agree? So many African nations are suffering from civil war. And now the interesting thing, civil war means basically war within the country, and most of the time two dominant tribes are going to fight with each other to establish control. So this is the one more important aspect, and where European power, the old colonial master, gets the opportunity to interfere in their internal matters. So the next important thing we are going to tell you about the next in second, European powers. Basically the old colonial master interfere in internal matter of respective nation. And why they are going to interfere? Because it was asked. By whom? By these nations, or the power which is ruling that particular nation state. They are going to ask help from their past colonial master to establish peace. And do you really want that, or do you really think so that European power wants peace there? Of course not. And if peace is not there, do you really think so the process of nation building is possible? Of course not. So internal factor, distinct, diverse, what we have mentioned, diverse ethnicity was there, and distinct internal disharmony was there, and this disharmony leads to civil war, and interference of European power was there. That is the two thing. The next important thing, as we have mentioned, yes everyone, as we have mentioned, what is required to make a nation strong? Yes everyone, what is required to make a nation strong? Of course, economy played an important role into that. We are going to discuss this in later. But other than economy, what is required? You, me, resource, human resource. Clear? As a very simple example, I just want to share with you. Recently, there was a birth anniversary of our first Prime Minister. What he did after independence? His focus was fully on establishment of education institutes. So many IITs, IIM and everything established. Why it was so? Why we focused on primary education? Why we focused on secondary education? Because we knew that economy is an important aspect, but to run the economy, to make a nation strong, what is required? Human resource. And that human resource, if it is what we can say enlightened one, then nation is growing faster, economy is growing faster. So what is required? Education. To make human enlightened, what is required? Education. And the most important thing is here that if you know, educational backwardness is there. Yes, in Africa, this is the most important problem. They are having huge resources and all, but the most important problem, educational backwardness is there. That is one of the internal factor responsible for their backwardness, ill prepared for nation building. Because if all are enlightened, they are not going to discuss about this ethnic differences on all. They should have a strong vision. They have a vision, futuristic vision. They want their country to be strong. They want their country to be grow. They want their country to be welfare state. They should not fall into any trap. Clear? So that is the case. And the third and most important thing, yes everyone, third and most important thing, and that is related to technical backwardness. Technical backwardness. What do we have mentioned? Huge resources in Africa. But have you seen industries there? Do you know that Africa is well known for this technology, that technology? No. So they are technologically backward. They cannot take advantage of whatever the resources they are having. That make them backward, and along with that, the most important thing, that make them dependent on the European power to develop the industry. And do you really think so? Again I am asking, do you really think so? European powers want this country to be a strong nation? Of course not, because they want to take as much as advantage from them. So these internal factors, diverse ethnicity, educational backwardness, technical backwardness. This technical backwardness means because they don't have technology, they are totally dependent on the technology given by the European powers, and European powers are using their upper hand over it. Along with that, the most important factor, whatever the industrial development is there, it is on the guidance of European power, and vested interest of European power is also in that. So these three internal factors and three external factors make this country backward, ill prepared for nation building, nation state, the concept of nation state. So this is clear to all of you? Yes everyone, this is clear? No doubt? Okay. Now we are going to deal with what is the demand of the question. So first we have discussed the concept, what exactly this topic was, what are the things we have to discuss or what have to study in the colonization, decolonization, new colonization, and the now most important thing, how to deal with this question. This question was asked in 2020, the last year only they asked this question. Critically examine, keyword critically examine, means you cannot take one one stand. You have to discuss rationally without any prejudice whether it was true, that after a century of dependency on European powers, African were ill prepared for the task of nation building. How you are going to deal with this? Any idea, any guess? First of all, don't you think so? Means most of you are going to say that yes, it is true, and you are going to mention internal factor, external factors and all, and you are going to end the answer. But my question is that first you should understand, no, what is nation? If you don't understand the nation, then how you are going to deal with that? Am I right or wrong? Do you know what is the concept or what is the definition of nation? Whether the nation was a previous term and it was used everywhere? Of course not. In the modern time, the nation concept developed. Earlier, what was there? Country was there. What is the difference between country and nation? So, before that, first we are going to discuss this concept as well. We are going to discuss the concept of nation and country. Country is a geographical area. And what is nation? Nation is also geographical area. Really? Of course, it is a geographical area, but the geographical area made up of whom? Made up of people. So first we are going to discuss about what is nation. Nation is a concept of homogeneous group of people. Homogeneous group of people. This homogeneous group of people is having cultural affinity or unity among them. This is the idea of oneness. So how this cultural affinity or unity is among them? So there are three more important factors responsible here. First, of course, language. You know that most of the nation states are formed on the basis of language. Most of them. Next, tradition. Maybe the ethnic tradition, yes, belongs to one particular family, one particular group and all. That is the case. Third important thing, that is if they share common history. If they share common history. Clear? Language, tradition or common history, these are the three different criteria, and that leads to cultural affinity or unity. Okay, next what? Then this cultural affinity or unity, because these all three factors create the oneness, a strong unity, and this oneness leads to the concept of nation. Very simple. The definition of nation is very simple. A group of homogeneous people. Who were they? Homogeneous people were having oneness, unity, cultural unity or affinity. This affinity is basically related to three: language, tradition or shares a common history. And because of that, oneness is there, and this oneness led to a formation of nation state. So can we say that Africans are, or African nations are having this aspect? Yes, can we say that African nations are having this aspect of oneness, whether they share the same language? Yes, whether they share the same language? Of course not. Then whether they share that same tradition, same ethnic group? Of course not. Whether they share the same history? Yes. Most of the African nations are having one important thread, and that is related to the recent past, means their colonial masters were one. They make them control, they make them work under a rule. So that's why their colonial past is quite same. So, but it is a process, it is not the case that in one way you are going to, but most of the African nation doesn't have this concept. And why? Education, most important aspect in that, and they are backward into that. Clear? Why India is a nation state? Because we share the same history for thousands of years, and educationally we are strong. So that's why we are not going to discuss about the, means in general, we are not going to discuss about the ethnicity, we are not going to discuss about the language and all. We love and respect of all ethnic culture, ethnicity, languages and everything. That's why India, and still we have to work a lot, and that's why it is said that India is a nation in making. Clear? But in African state, this concept is still somehow lacking. Clear? So now how to deal with this thing? Which one? The question. We are going to discuss this question, how to deal with this question. Critically examine whether it was true and all dependency on European Africans were ill prepared for the task of nation building. So how we are going to discuss deal with this question? First part is of course introduction. Part 1, introduction. First, what you are going to define nation. Yes, you have to introduce, no, because the concept is of nation building. You should know about the nation. Clear? So first you have to define what is nation. Clear? Second most important thing, part 2. Part 2, you are going to talk about few handful Western educated people tried to introduce this concept of nationalism through their national movement. Clear? Means it is not the case that all African nations are not at all aware of the concept of nation building and all. No, of course, Western educated, learned one, those who led the national movement of their respective country, they try to introduce, because question is not just criticize or telling that yes it is true. No, the efforts were there. So you are going to mention about the Western educated nationalist, Western educated nationalist and freedom struggle. In short, and it is very common everywhere, the Western educated freedom struggle is common. So at least 4-5 lines you are going to write here. No doubt at all, it's very simple, very simple. If you don't know, just imagine the Indian freedom struggle, you will get to know how Western educated Indians played an important role and tried to introduce the concept of nation. Clear? Now the third part, they tried to introduce, but who were they? Western educated, elite. What about the common masses? They were influenced, they were basically what you can say, convinced with the idea of nation state. But do you really think so? Those who are in the lower rung of the society, those who are educationally backward, they also consider they are the part of nation state? Of course not. And why? Lack of education. So you are going to mention part 3. In the part 3, you are going to mention about limitations. That means whatever we have discussed now, internal factors. And internal factors, that is limitation in the process of nation building. Clear everyone? Internal factors, internal disharmony and all and all and all. Next important thing, the part 4. Part 4, what you are going to discuss in part 4? External factors. External factors, we already mentioned the Cold War politics was there. Along with that, still I have to, no, you know that. So external factors we mentioned. Clear? Fall into trap of neocolonialism. Yes. Even the European powers try to interfere on all the external factors you are going to mention. So now you mention the problems in the African state, and that made, or that factors are responsible not to make African nation as a nation state, or not make them a strong nation state. Clear? This thing is clear, but without conclusion, how it is possible to write the answer? Clear? Conclusion, what you are going to conclude? Conclusion is basically summary of whatever we have discussed. So you are going to make the conclusion, and conclusion is of course supporting the view that yes, these European factors or European powers make them weak. So conclusion should be that it should be like, it's very simple. It is not the case the idea of nation state is not it is not the case that idea of nation state was new in African nation. Their freedom fighters or the Western educated nationalists through national movement tried to introduce this idea of nation state, but this idea was having limitations, and then you are going to mention the so many internal problems make the process of nation building weak, and then you are going to end with this. That's why Africans were ill prepared for the task of nation building. Simple. Yes everyone, is that clear? Part first, you have to define what is nation state. Part 2, you are going to discuss about the Western educated. Means you have to write, because critical examine is there. The concept was not new, it was trying to introduce by Western educated people and all. Limitations were there. Why? Elite. Commoners were not aware of that. Next, you are going to mention the internal problems here, internal factors. Next, you are going to mention why Western powers doesn't want make them powerful, and then you are going to conclude your answer. That is the way you are going to deal with this. I hope all of you understood whatever we have discussed, the concept and the question, and how to deal with this question. If you are having any question, any query, you can ask us. Yes, so that's all for today's session. Thank you very much for your valuable time. See you soon.